And hello, I'm Sion Rhodes with Channel 2 News. We are continuing our KPRC special presentation, Making Houston Stronger, Rebuilding our Nation, our Houston rather, after Harvey. It's a really tough topic that we've tackled the last hour on air. We're now continuing the conversation here on Facebook Live for you. So we want to bring in now some of the folks who are here with us in our phone bank in Studio B. I'm here with Frida Villalobos. She is with Baker Ripley, and Baker Ripley is one of the nonprofits that is offering a lot of help to folks in the aftermath. So talk to us about the help that people still need here.
Anything from housing assistance, financial assistance, people are still living under tents, for example. So one thing that we want to make sure people know at home is that people are still rebuilding, people still need help, and we are one of the many agencies that is doing a lot of the work on the ground.
What are some of the processes that people can go through to get that help?
So one of the best ways to reach out and to get on the list, for example, is to call the United Way helpline, 211. We want folks to understand that there's a lot of folks that need help, so just be patient with us. That is the best way to get on the list for our case management. Once connected to our agency, they're going to be connected with the case managers that's going to walk them through the process and guide them.
And we do want you to know that we have two numbers to call if you need assistance, financially speaking, or also dealing with housing. So the number for financial assistance is 713-778-8920. We also have a number, 713-778-8930, and that is for any housing assistance. You can see we have many volunteers, employees with the city and county, and some Baker Ripley volunteers as well, here answering your phones. The phones have not stopped ringing because we know so many of you are still trying to put the pieces of your lives back together, and these folks are here to try to help you walk through that process. We know a lot of people are still dealing with FEMA applications as well, Frida, trying to just get the basic help that they need.
Exactly. So it ranges. We always talk to folks, and in every case is different, every need is different. So the best thing that we can tell folks is to connect one of the local agencies that is doing a lot of the long-term recovery and get someone to guide them through the process and touch base with us. Baker Ripley also has restoration centers at all of our community centers, and the best way to get in touch with them is to visit our website, bakerripley.org. Go to the locations page on our website, and there's going to be a list of locations where they can go in person, talk to someone, and learn more about how they can get support.
And we are glad that the phones are ringing. We know that you're probably still trying to get through, but do not give up. Continue to call, because these volunteers are here, able to guide you through the process of getting all of the help that you need. Again, the number to call, 713-778-8920. That is if you need any sort of financial assistance. If you need any housing assistance, the number 713-778-8930. And of course, we're going to be here throughout the evening for the next 20 minutes or so to walk you through how Houston is recovering in the aftermath of Harvey.
All right, Sion, thank you so much. Those of you who have stayed with us online or joining us online, thanks so much for being with us. We were on the air for an hour with the mayor and the county judges, you know. And the mayor had to leave. He had other business, pressing business to attend to, but County Judge Ed Emmett has stayed with us.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us. So talk to us. You know, the people are watching at home, and everybody has a Harvey story. Everybody has some experience with that storm, all to varying degrees, and people just want to know, what is the city and the county doing at this moment to address things? What are the things that are being addressed at this point? And I know a lot of it are big picture ideas, and you can't do it until some big dollars arrive.
Well, yeah, during the hour when we were on the air, we talked a lot about money, but already on the regulatory side, the county has acted. The mayor has put out his proposal, and my guess is I'd be shocked if the city council didn't go along with that, so that's probably going to happen. We can do those things. And then we've started the buyout program. The county started spending county dollars. We hope we get reimbursed, but we really can't wait. We've got to show that this is job one going forward. As soon as we can start getting some of the federal dollars in, some of the state dollars in, then we can start completing some of these projects. But beyond the projects that we know we have to complete, we've identified other things. And I'll give you an example. After the two earlier floods, too many people had drowned in underpasses. And the county... I
remember you took ownership of that.
I said, we can't let this happen again. Well, unfortunately, we did have one underpass death this time.
Yeah.
And that was in an underpass that hadn't been identified previously. But nobody drowned in any of those other underpasses because we said, we're going to solve that. And that was the county and TxDOT and HECTRA and Metro and the city all working together. So we have to do those kind of things, and we will.
Explain the buyout program. How do you determine where, when, how much?
Can I throw this one to the audience?
Absolutely.
Russ Poppy, Harris County
Yep.
Flood Control. Explain
Perfect.
our buyout program. I don't know, does the city have a buyout program? You fund ours, that's what I thought.
That's right. So our buyout program is primarily funded by federal dollars, usually coming from FEMA. And FEMA has different buyout programs that can be made available post an event like Harvey. And until the Senate moves forward and actually approves a third supplemental, we want to know exactly what programs get funded in FEMA. And that's an important distinction. I'll give you one example. If they fund one program within FEMA, the structure will have to have flood insurance in order to qualify for a buyout. But if they fund a different program, they don't have to have flood insurance. And so what we're encouraging our residents to do is if they're interested in a buyout program, they can go to our website and sign up to be considered when the funding does come, and then we know what programs are going to be implemented, and we can balance that criteria against people who have volunteered for buyouts.
And once the buyout takes place, what happens to that home or property?
We demolish it and we let that lot go back into a natural state. When we have a large enough number of lots put together, then that gives us something that we can do additionally, such as create an additional stormwater detention basin that would help reduce flood risks for structures remaining in that area.
I talked to a gentleman who operates a gas station in my neighborhood, and he says, I live out in the county, in the west part of the county, and there are 360 some odd homes in my neighborhood. There are only 80 people living there right now. The rest of us are flooded out. We're waiting to find out if money's going to come where we can, rebuild our homes. A lot of people don't have money to continue. They didn't have flood insurance. We're in motels and apartment units right now, waiting to see if we're even going to be able to stay here, whether we're going to have to walk away from our mortgages.
Well, that's the frustration. Put yourself in that position. Do you spend money and rebuild and then get bought out? I mean, that's the limbo that people are in. That's why we've got to,
good word.
We've got to have this acted upon quickly. So, and we won't have enough money to do all the buyouts. We just won't. So then the question becomes, what do you do with the rest of them?
Right, and and I think also Bill and I always talk about flood insurance. Once upon a time, unless you lived in a floodplain, you would then get flood insurance. But I think Harvey and the previous storms that we've had have completely changed the mindset, and I think everybody who chooses to buy in the city of Houston wisely should purchase flood insurance.
Yeah, I think all of us have come to that conclusion. Everybody should have flood insurance. The irony is, we have a cabin up in Liberty County. We're required to have flood insurance. Water didn't come within 6 feet of it. Mm-hmm. It's never going to flood. So the whole FEMA definition of floodplain is just not right. And we've seen that.
And unfortunately, I always say, flood insurance doesn't cost very much money. You need to get it because no matter where you live in this area, your home can flood. And I was saying that without any basis all these years. Now I have basis for saying it because we've just seen it. But there's a wild disparity in flood insurance costs. I pay $400 a year, which is nothing. But I know somebody who's paying $3,000 a year because their home flooded in one of the 2 prior events. Suddenly it just skyrockets. And I have a feeling there'll be a complete reassessment on the part of the federal government about how much to charge for flood insurance in homes because of these floodplains that are changing.
Oh, yeah, the floodplains are going to change, and that's going to change the dynamic of the whole flood insurance program. And when we talk about flood insurance, we're talking homeowners here.
Yes.
But don't forget, a lot of people impacted by Harvey were renters. Mm-hmm. And so renters have, frequently, as the mayor said, those are the people really on the margins. And they can't afford it either. Even though they don't lose a home, they're displaced. And we've got to address where we put apartment buildings too.
Mm-hmm. I'm really curious about Meyerland, the neighborhood where you grew up, and boy, I mean, that area has been a bullseye for flooding. And you see the new construction that's taking place, and they are elevating. I mean, they are really elevating these new homes.
It's more like Galveston Island.
Correct.
Than Meyerland.
And so you're going to have these homes that are built way up high next to homes that are not occupied or not occupied. How is a community going to do this?
Well, we've seen it before. We saw it in Braves Heights, for example, following Allison. Mm-hmm. There are homes that are built up and there are homes that are still the way they were. A lot of those lower homes, the original homes, were pretty well destroyed by Harvey, though. So I think you're going to see nearly all of them built
Everything go up.
Yeah.
As we go to Cambrell for a question from the audience, I'll say something wildly unpopular. I'm sorry Marvin Zindler is gone because he lived in Maryland, and I think he'd be very useful right now. Go ahead, Cambrell.
The spirit of Marvin is useful right now.
That's right. He's there.
I've got Heather DeChone here, and she has a question. She's a social worker. She has a question about something I know that's near and dear to your heart.
Mental health.
Good evening. Yes, absolutely. We've talked a lot about resilience, and we've talked about mitigation with regards to the land and homes. I'm really interested in terms of the people and some of our most vulnerable, which are children. This was highly traumatic. They lost their homes, they lost their schools. What are we doing as a community, both government and citizens, to help those children?
If you're referring to their mental health, boy, I could spend a long time talking about mental health in the state of Texas. We're way behind. We need to get much, much better. But I know, there's an organization, Communities in Schools, that's active. A lot of these nonprofits, when they talk about long-term case management, a lot of that is geared toward providing mental health services. But we can do so much more. I mean, mental health has obviously been a passion of mine for a long time. And when you look at the fact that the state of Texas is ranked 48th in terms of per capita spending, and this last legislative session, one of the state senators said, we don't need mental health in schools. And it's the most horrifying statement I think I've ever heard, because I also chair the juvenile board. And if you don't deal with mental health when it first appears, or mental issues when they first appear, then you're going to get to deal with it all the way through. We've got to integrate mental health into the total health care of our community. And Harvey's just another point of reference that makes us realize that.
One of the most impactful stories I saw on our air, and we talked about it too, our Leaf for Lisi followed a family who was flooded out of their home. They're now living in an apartment. They are much farther away from their schools, from their places of work, so now they have added on so much more time in traffic, in trying to get people to and fro. And while they're maneuvering, they're also dealing with the bank, with getting their money, with getting, funded for repairs, and everything is getting drawn out. And the stress and the impact on this one family really brought that story home, because it's so much more than seeing a house with water in it and a family packing up their bags and leaving. That is the story that's been going on now for 5 months, of people who are exhausted. And that plays into what you're talking about. Where do these families go for just an outlet? 5 months of unbearable stress that a lot of people are facing in our community.
There are tremendous nonprofits, and
they have to seek them.
And they have to seek them.
Yeah.
And the one that's gotten a lot of notoriety, rightfully so, is Baker Ripley. But there are so many others that are out there that are providing the same kind of services. Call United Way. Ask for help. If you feel like you need mental health help, make the call.
We have our flood czar here, as it were, Steve Costello. Sion?
I was just in the phone bank, and a lot of people asking about how we can prevent this from happening again. You were appointed flood czar well before Harvey. Talk to us about what's being done to stop this.
So publicly, when I'm out talking about flood,
Cambrell, well, could you walk up with your mic, Cambrell? I don't think that was
to the community that there's a separation of duties. The city is responsible for water from rooftop to the bayou, and then the county is responsible from the bayou to the bay. However, as a homeowner, when you have water in your house, you don't really care about separation of duties. You want to make sure all agencies are working together. And that was pretty evident tonight, that the mayor and the judge are sitting here talking collectively about a joint effort to try to solve problems. And it really boils down to increased capacity. It really boils down to investment in infrastructure. I'm an engineer. We keep saying, we've been saying it for many, many years, we have to invest in infrastructure because it's the foundation of our community. So to prevent a devastating event like Harvey, we'll never prevent the actual rainfall from occurring, but what we can do is mitigate its effects, and that's really what this discussion is about. And working together, both agencies, that's what we'll be doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me give you an example following up on that. The mayor was asked about the drainage fee and what that's going to, and he talked about drainage on the streets. Braes Heights, as I mentioned earlier, our daughter and her family were taken out by boat. The next day, the streets were clear. So it sounds almost silly to say we actually have pretty good drainage, but it got overwhelmed in Harvey.
And you're right about that. Areas that had flooded in an unusual flood event in 2009 after Hurricane Ike didn't flood during Harvey. I mean, it was just the weirdest thing about how that happened. But then excuse me one thing, Dominique. I think what's happened is that there have been drainage improvements, and we saw the result of that.
Well, I'll give you the best example. The whole Sims Bayou watershed, no flooding, because that project has been done. And I'm looking at Russ Poppy again. We need to make sure that we do that on Braes and on Hunting and on Clear Creek and on White Oak.
Sims Bayou, I've been here 43 years, and Sims Bayou was the perennial flooding area. All those homes were bought out, parks were built, etc. But you're right, the flooding has mitigated there because there was a focus on it for many years.
I think the two go hand in hand. I mean, I do think that the work on the street flooding certainly helps. And I mean, I'm not far from Shepherd Drive, and while that construction was going on, I wasn't singing the city's praises, but now that it's beyond, you know, I see the impact, and it's made a difference.
Look at the Texas Medical Center. You know, it went under for Allison. And all those improvements on Kirby, yeah, I cursed those improvements just like you did the ones on Shepherd. But it didn't flood this time.
That's right. It does help. It does help. Cambrell, do you have a question?
I don't, but Michael Huffmeister does.
Hi, Michael.
Judge Emmett, good evening. I want to explore a bit about one of the points that's been raised in improving capacity of the bayous. It perhaps is a finer point that when we raise our standard to the 500-year floodplain, that elevation difference in many places is not so distinct, maybe a foot or 18 inches over the 100-year floodplain. But in areas in proximity to the bayou, particularly those that have constraints in capacity, that difference can be 3 or 4 feet, which is profound since most of the city was built to the 100-year floodplain design. The question is, will we be attacking the conveyance side of that equation to bring those areas to a similar standard that we see in most of the rest of the city, where the difference between the 500-year and the 100-year is a smaller amount, 1.5 feet. So on Braes, on Hunting, on, when you haven't mentioned, Buffalo Bayou, or areas that need attention with respect to conveyance. How will that be addressed?
Yeah, clearly conveyance is the mission of the Harris County Flood Control District. And the ones you mentioned, I won't put Russ Poppy back on the spot again, but if you talk about Buffalo, there's a special issue on Buffalo Bayou, and that is it's privately owned along a large stretch of it. And if you want to go to those homeowners in all those memorial villages and places like that and say, oh, by the way, we want to take your backyard, it gets a little bit dicey.
You've just said something I'm hearing for the very first time, that the bayou is privately owned.
That's correct.
Can you enlighten us?
Cambrell,
Steve, you want to do it?
No, it's true. So we have limited rights-of-way, if any, contiguous rights-of-way along Buffalo Bayou, primarily between Beltway 8 and Shepherd Drive. And if I understand correctly, I mean, that's a lot of the perception is that this is a sort of the bottleneck, because again, it's a very natural section of Buffalo Bayou. And so it's very wooded. There's a lot of environmental value that's there. And so Judge is right. I mean, in order for us to go and look at increasing conveyance through there, it's not only the construction cost, it's land acquisition, so we actually have the property rights to build on public property, and then environmental mitigation. And those are going to be very big ticket dollar amounts.
You're talking about one of the most expensive areas in the city of Houston.
I am.
And eminent domain.
And many of those
Unless
homes,
they're willing sellers, that's correct.
That's right.
Yes.
and many of those homes, hundreds of them, flooded. If not during the initial event of Harvey, then after the release of water from the reservoirs. So they would at least have some incentive to have conveyance through that area.
Well, this is, I'm now reading more about flooding and mitigation than I ever anticipated I would read. But what you're going to find, I think, with a lot of people who flooded when the gates were opened on the Addicks and Barker, is that they're going to assume that that's never going to happen again because we're going to improve Addicks and Barker to where they won't have to open the gates. And so they'll be reluctant.
I understand that we have Jeff Linder in the audience here.
There he is.
There he is.
Yeah, you must be champing at the bit here.
You've been listening to this for a little over an hour now, Jeff. What do you think is the important thing that people need to take away at this point?
One thing we've talked about a lot of, we need funding and we need that. We also need education. And it's some of the responsibility of the residents that live in this area to educate themselves on their flooding risk, to understand what watershed they live in, and to also understand that flooding is our natural disaster here, and it's going to happen from time to time, and we have to be prepared for it. And I think one of the things that Judge Emmett said right after the storm was we have to, in some degree, we can try to mitigate, but we have to learn how to live with this because it's going to happen again, and we just have to learn how to live with it.
How do we do that?
I think a lot of what you've heard here this evening, mitigation, but in some cases, you know, it's understanding the risk that we face. And a lot of what you heard here is the right direction that we need to go. And then, of course, as you've heard, it comes down to funding and how we get it done.
Jeff, during the storm, you, along with the county judge and mayor, worked 24/7. And a lot of people noticed that, and for some reason they focused on the amount of work you were putting in, and money was raised to send you on vacation. You couldn't really take the money, so we understand you distributed it somehow. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, the GoFundMe funds have been distributed to the flood victims, and it was going into neighborhoods and knocking on the door and passing out the money. And
yourself?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And
what kind of reaction did you get?
People are very grateful, and you know, just to be clear, I'm just the vehicle that did that. The citizens of this region raised this money, and from the folks that received it, about 32 individual families received it. Back to everybody that helped raise it, they are very grateful for that.
Thank you for all that you've done.
Thank you.
And especially your time during a very frightening storm when people were hanging to every word that came from you. They came from you. They were making decisions on what to do with their lives, their
Certainly,
families, their property.
Our county judge and our mayor deserve a great deal of thanks as well. I mean, it was yeoman's work you put in, both of you.
Well, I don't know if you've seen our emergency operations center or not, but it's
seen it on television a lot.
Well, you know, we had probably 500 or 600 people in that emergency operations center, and they're all professionals. And one of the takeaways I remember so clearly, you know, on the Friday afternoon when my main decision was whether or not to cancel the Coldplay concert at NRG. True, that was the tough decision that night. Tornadoes were going up through northwest Harris County. And I'm down on the floor of the EOC, and the deputy constable is looking at the screen, and he goes, that's my house.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And he went back to work. And there were people like that. We had people in that EOC who got word that their homes were flooded, their families were gone, their dogs were missing, all this stuff, and they just kept working. Right. Those are the people. And the folks that actually went out in the water and rescued folks. Those first responders, the private citizens, those are the real Harvey heroes. No question about it.
That's a story we hadn't heard. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Thank you. Yeah, we've received so many comments and questions from Facebook, and I don't know if anybody can tackle this or even wants to, but the question was about the Red Cross, and there seems to be a lot of frustration about the Red Cross, the money raised. This person says, you know, it seemed like the only help was coming from J.J. Watt.
Okay, I'm not shy, so I'll go ahead and take that on. The Red Cross does some good things, but they are a voluntary organization. And so in the height of a crisis, their volunteers couldn't get out any better than anybody else could. They didn't have trucks. They couldn't couldn't stand up the shelters. And I got to say, it was a little bit galling to where we had to provide the trucks, we had to provide the drivers, and every time you turned on the television, they're raising money.
A ton of money.
And I'm going, well, wait a minute. Shouldn't some of that money be going to these local nonprofits that are actually doing the work? So yeah, I think there is a little bit of hard feeling there. And it's nothing against the volunteers of Red Cross, but they need to do what they can do. And in the actual crisis itself, they're not a very helpful organization. When we wanted to stand up NRG Center, I went to Baker Ripley, and 5.5 hours later, they had a center set up for 10,000 people, local grocery store, HEB, pharmacies, everything was supplied. We need to make sure we got that in the future. Those are the people you need to be in the foxhole with.
Well, and that also begs the question, should we, the media, be directing people to donating to different organizations? Yes, is the answer to that. And so that's an important discussion to have, because it's food for thought for us, and it will make us also rethink the phone banks that we hold and where we tell people to donate.
Absolutely. I must say that I was doing this a lot when y'all were doing the phone bank for the Red Cross.
Okay.
Yeah. Little did we know.
Right.
I mean, we thought we were doing a good thing. While you're talking about standing up NRG, you brought in Bill White and your predecessor, Robert Eccles, to help with that. And that it struck me at the time as a pretty courageous thing to do. To bring in that kind of help, and not say, well, I can do it, but to say I need help.
Well, those two had been through Katrina. I mean, they knew about those operations. I will say that they both said yes. Unfortunately, Mayor White's home was flooded, and he was in dire circumstances himself. But if you don't listen to the advice of people who have done it, then I'm sorry, you're just being stupid. I mean, you need to reach out to people who have gone through these kind of things before.
During our town hall, we were directing people to our website, Click2Houston.com, because we have provided links for them to be able to reach out to their Congress members, because what we have concluded during this hour and a half, noise, and we need to let our leaders know that we desperately need this money moving forward. It's not about looking back, and it's not about a Band-Aid. It's about making our city functional in the future. And so I encourage people to go visit Click2Houston.com right now, find a link, find a way to reach out, talk to somebody, and let them know that we are desperately looking for and needing federal dollars.
This has been an extension of our 1-hour live town hall meeting that began at 7 o'clock this evening. We've continued here on our KPRC Facebook page. We're about to conclude. But we want to let you know in leaving here that the entire broadcast, both on air and online, will be available on Click2Houston.com for those of you who didn't catch some or all of our broadcast earlier.
We can't thank you enough for your time.
No, thank you for doing this.
Emmett, thank you so much. Thank you. And to the members of our audience as well, and our reporters who were getting great questions. This was a big open dialogue that needed to happen. So thank you to everybody.
We'll see you on our news at 10 o'clock. Please. Thank you.